Hey, what's going on, everyone? And thanks for joining today's 420 Cannabis Legalization Roundtable, brought to you by the Cannabis Equity Illinois Coalition. The Cannabis Equity Illinois Coalition is a grassroots organization formed in 2019 by community members fighting to make sure that cannabis legalization in Illinois brings equity, justice, and repair to the communities most harmed by the war on drugs. My name is AKELE PARNELL. I'm a cannabis attorney and equity advocate here in Chicago. This is a really special 420 for a lot of reasons. One, because it comes on the heels of legalization in 4 states. So that's big. We're going to talk about that in a minute. We have some great guests to guide us in that conversation. But then also, this is the second 420 since legalization in Illinois. And so there's a lot to celebrate there, in addition to a lot to continue to work on. And so we want to reflect on all that with our conversation today. As I mentioned, we're fortunate to have 4 amazing guests to help lead us in a conversation about what legalization in New York, New Jersey, Virginia, and New Mexico is going to look like. We want to learn about their work and the work that their organizations have been doing to push for social equity. So I'm really excited. Can't wait to actually visit these states. And I actually got the vaccine, both doses, as of a few weeks ago. So Dr. Fauci said I'm good, like I can go and travel. Not a threat. So I'm working on that. But anyway, on to our guests. I'm going to actually allow them to introduce themselves because I would not do them justice. And so.
All righty. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on your 420. We appreciate your attendance. So my name is Lo, Shalom Wagstaffe, but after years of just dealing with the world butchering my name, I've just shortened it for Lo, but feel free to call me Shalom if you feel so inclined. I'm co-founder of Women of Color in Cannabis. I'm super short, so you can't see my shirt, but here it is. And we are a 501c3 based organization out of Brooklyn, New York. I always say conceptually we were founded in 2017 because that's when the wheels started turning in our minds that we wanted to do something. And when I say we, I mean my partner, Patricia Wright. But in 2018 is when we had our first in-person session, and we're all about arming women of color, other marginalized and disadvantaged groups into increasing their skill set and getting education into entering the industry. So we're non-plant touching. We're super organization and lobbying based. We're all about arming people with information so that they can really participate thoughtfully in cannabis. We have our sessions once a month. We try to tackle different topics, and we know that we're not the experts on a lot of these subjects. So we try to partner with other people who are more well-versed. Definitely prioritize women of color and other minority groups as speakers. That's how I actually met Jessica. So hey, Jessica. She was able to join us and speak at a Canna session. So yeah, that's Women of Color in Cannabis, WOCC, pronounced WOCC, WOKE. And if you're interested in learning more about us, you can visit our website at WOCC.world, because welcome to Woke World. And thank you so much, Akil, for having us.
Thanks, Lo, for joining us. The next, Chelsea.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chelsea Higgs-Wise, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of Marijuana Justice here in Virginia. And we're really excited to be part of this conversation as part of the new club of those that have legalized recently. So we're the new kids on the block, as well as everyone else on this panel. But we were founded back in 2019, particularly to repeal the prohibition that has caused so much of the disproportionate impact on Black and Brown people here in the Commonwealth. And we really wanted to take this first step forward in attacking the failed war on drugs. So we're really excited to be here, Marijuana Justice, where we take the approach with repeal, repair, and reparations with our Legalize It Right campaign. So happy 420, everyone.
Awesome, happy 420. And actually, Virginia, I think, is the first Southern state to go rec, so that's huge. So good work there. Next, Jess.
Awesome. So thank you so much for having me. Happy 420, everybody. So my name is Jess Gonzalez. I am a cannabis attorney in New Jersey at a firm called Bressler, Amory & Russ. I'm also outside general counsel for Minorities for Medical Marijuana, national nonprofit with about 27, I think, chapters now in the US. I'm also on the policy committee for the Minority Cannabis Business Association, where I really got a first look at policy on a national level that really helped me bring it to the state level as well. I'm also the social equity co-chair for the International Cannabis Bar Association. I was part of NJCAN, which was the coalition to help push forward with legalization. And I was part of the social impact committee to ensure that the conversation around legalization always centered around social equity and social justice. So I was an integral part of the testimony period here in New Jersey to really get social equity into the bill. So very happy that I was able to get some form of social equity, which I will, get into later. But I wear a couple of different hats in the space, but very honored to be here amongst all of you.
Wow. So if you didn't know this, like Jess does everything. Like I couldn't have said all that. Like, what do you not do? Very impressive. And then last but not least is Rosalie.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rosalie Flores. I am helped found the coalition New Mexico Cannabis Justice Project. It's a very new coalition. We're going to form an entity and very soon, but we came together kind of at last minute to help address some of the equity issues within New Mexico. I've been in the cannabis space for 5 years and helped work on the first piece of equitable legislation here in Colorado, and have a nonprofit for expungement also here in Colorado. So I've worked with Minority Cannabis Business Association and Minorities for Medical Marijuana, a number of organizations over the years, Cannabis Equity Illinois and National Expungement Week. So I've been in this conversation for a moment, but this now with the legalization in New Mexico, it's hitting very close to home. And so I got involved, and I'm excited to be talking about some of the things that we learned.
Great. Well, we're excited to have you on. Definitely excited to hear more about New Mexico. And it's always a pleasure when I get the chance to work with you. So, so the first question I want to throw out to get us started is, what is marijuana legalization going to look like in your state? And, like, what are the social equity provisions? What is licensing, expungements, community reinvestment? Like, how is all that going to work? And I know, Dan, that's kind of a big conversation, but, who wants to get us started?
Well, as the first, as legalizing in the South, I'll kind of jump in and go first. It is such a big conversation. So I'm definitely going to invite everyone to visit our webpage, marijuanajustice.org, and our social media, THC Justice Now, to find out more about this conversation. But as of July 1, and here in Virginia, it's like our second 420, actually, for 2021. On July 1, that means that simple possession up to 1 ounce will be legal. So on your person, you can have up to 1 ounce. That means no fines, no fees. That's very different from what we just did 1 year ago with decriminalization. It also means that personal cultivation will become legal starting July 1, that up to 4 plants per household. I know in the proposal is per person, but it is per household. So let everyone know that they have to be out of public view. They cannot be outside. They have to be properly labeled, and of course, away from those under 21. And there's also a sealing of records that will be starting July 1 as well, particularly only on the misdemeanor of possession with intention to distribute. If you had a possession charge, simple possession charge, they were sealed last year with decriminalization. And for those with felonious charges in the past, unfortunately, we were not able to get those either sealed or into automatic expungement or sealing. We did pass automatic, but because the systems aren't ready, they won't start being automatic until 2025. So there's a lot of work that has to be done to ensure when we start our commercial market in 2024, that our folks that have been impacted have had their records sealed, expunged, and so that their application could be seen inclusively and wholly when we start applying for licenses that will come in 2023. So there's a lot going on in Virginia, but our first step is this legalization piece this summer. You can start applying for licenses in 2023. If you're social equity, it's 6 months prior to that, and the market will open up in 2024. There's so much that we are still working on, particularly with the license and social equity, that we will have to come back next year, and why, if you are in Virginia, to please continue to follow us and hear what we're talking about this summer and approaching next general session. And last thing that's happening huge on July 1 is when our Virginia Cannabis Control Authority board starts to get seated. Now we will have 20 individuals that will be overseeing, and they are actually given much of the authority and decision-making agency for how the licenses and regulation will be run. So we will be looking at that. And I know there's so much, but one other piece I have to mention is our Cannabis Equity Reinvestment Fund that will take, as of now, 30% of the tax revenues and into this fund that will fund two different revenues of macro reinvestment into communities disproportionately impacted, and the other ones for social equity applicants and operators to have that capital. Folks are like, hey, is there going to be day one? Yes. So what does that mean? We did ban vertical integration at this top tier level, but for many of the big pharma that are vertically integrated and will continue to do that, they have to pay $1 million into that SURF fund. So that way, the social equity applicants that are starting in 2024 will have access to that capital. So there are many different things. And oh, one last piece that got entered at the end that we take so much pride in is that they did create another tier for licenses for micro businesses. There's not a lot of language around that right now. So again, why we have to come back next year. And I'll tell you what, Jessica Gonzalez on this panel is one person that taught me so much about micro licenses and making sure it's in there, but also workable within the language. So continue to follow marijuana justice. We're working really hard to continue to repeal, because 1 ounce probably is not enough, to repair people's backgrounds, criminal records, because we need more folks free. And let's talk about what the reparations for the drug war looks like here in the Commonwealth and in the South. So yeah, that's a little bit about what Virginia looks like with legalization. If I didn't answer those questions, please visit our social media and our website.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, I'm just really proud of, the work that Marijuana Justice has done, you've done, and Virginia for like really taking that step. Because I know I'm from the South originally too, and I know like, getting them to move on stuff like this is incredibly difficult. So the 30%, that's amazing. Even getting up to 1 ounce possession, like all that stuff, we want to get it up there, get it higher, but that's great. Then you mentioned Jess from New Jersey. So Jess, do you want to let us know what's going on in New Jersey?
Sure thing. Yeah. So we officially legalized February 22nd of this year. So even though the bill passed in December, it took a very long time for the governor to sign it because of a lot of inconsistencies. So one thing that New Jersey did that I really caution any state who is on the verge of legalization or is having these conversations is to not delineate the terms marijuana and cannabis. Because what we ended up doing here in New Jersey is that now they're defining marijuana as cannabis that is not from a legal dispensary, and that is decriminalized, whereas cannabis from a dispensary, it's called cannabis and it is legalized. And so here, both marijuana and cannabis both allow up to 6 ounces on your person. We do not have home grow, which I think is definitely a tremendous oversight, but we do have 3 bills right now that are pending that do contemplate home grow. Some of them differ between just for medical, other ones for adult use. But as you can see, New Jersey's definitely behind the ball on that one, as other states have actually allowed home grow. But some really good things that are in the bill is we do have sort of percentage allocations, right? Constitutionally, we can't say set asides. So we have 15% for minority certified businesses, 15% for women and disabled veteran type businesses. For me, this is what I consider to be the absolute bare minimum. But we do also have conditional licenses as well. And these conditional licenses basically means, if you have 75% of your application done, you can submit it to the commission. The commission will approve it, give you a provisional license, and then you have 120 days, right? This is going to help out with investments, because if you can go to an investor and say, I have a provisional license, I have 75% of the way done, I may not have all the capital, but I'm on the verge of getting a license, it is going to help folks. And there are certain salary caps. You can't make more than $200,000 if you're an individual, or if you file jointly with your tax returns, nor more than $400,000. We also have micro licenses, which definitely Chelsea and I had a huge conversation about, because if you would have asked me about 2 to 3 months ago about micro licenses, I would have told you that they were a very bad idea in the way that New Jersey defined them, because New Jersey created a very restrictive structure around micro licenses, such that when I brought this model and I took it to folks in California and Washington, I said, is this workable? Could you actually profit with this model? And all of them laughed at it and said, no, we would not be able to actually. So I took this to the senators, I took this to the state. I said, this is not workable. And these micro licenses are going to be baited to the minority community as like, hey, this is your way to get in. And they're going to spend the exact same amount of money and they're going to do all this investment just to learn that that model is way too restrictive. So what I advocated for was, if you're not going to remove those restrictions, make it so after a year, these micro licenses can convert to full scale and all of those mechanisms go away. So I was actually able to get that language in the bill, and I'm very, very proud of it, because that's at least going to help out with local entrepreneurship. Because imagine going to an investor and saying, invest in my micro license or invest in a full scale, which one are they going to choose, right? But if you can say, hey, you know, I'm going to go for a micro license, but in a year after showing of compliance, I can convert. That's a much more, you know, sort of attractive business model as well. We do also have an office, it's called the Office of Minority, Women, and Disabled Veterans Cannabis Development. And this is the office that is going to oversee a lot of the social equity goals, making sure that those percentages are met, analyzing reports, who's still incarcerated, who's actually getting the licenses, do we need to expand, do we need to create more? The one thing I will say that we don't have is we don't have a social equity applicant status. And that's probably the one thing that really worries me the most, because we have a certain amount of tax revenue that is earmarked for social equity programs that are supposed to be governed by both the commission and municipalities. The problem is there's no bridge between who actually could qualify for those programs. So I'm hoping that the commission will actually create a social equity program. But those are just some of the sort of, you know, really good things that we see in the bill. There's obviously a lot more work to do at the regulatory level, so I definitely have my work cut out for me in the future. But I always tell folks, it's best to start off, at least we have a foundation, at least we have something to build upon. And based on my reading of the law, there is a lot more room for the commission to come in and put forth more sort of formal social equity programs.
Okay, well, great work there. And I was really excited to hear that you can get a micro license and then transition to you know, a regular full-scale license. I think a lot of other states need to take the to follow y'all on that. In Illinois, we have a sort of craft cannabis grower license, or whatever, which is like a little mini grow license. And I wish we would do something like that, because when I first heard about that, a lot of folks were like, this business model is just not workable. And of course, if you look into it, it's going to be really challenging. So glad that New Jersey is making a pathway to scale. Rosalie, can you tell us a little bit about what's going on in New Mexico?
Hi, yeah. So New Mexico, to start, there is no equity per se in the bill. The word itself is not mentioned. It was pushed and touted as an equitable bill because there is an opportunity for micro licenses. And when the bill was being passed, it started off as a 99 plant count, but there was a lot of resistance. So now micro licenses can have up to 200 plants. My involvement became when I saw that there was an equity in the bill and it was being sold as an equitable bill. I don't think that micro licenses are equity per se, and especially if there's no funding or training or any of the other components needed to actually be successful in the industry. So what started off as just saying, hey, there's no equity in this bill, you know, what's done, really kind of morphed into something that I wasn't expecting, and it really kind of turned into some very basic water issues that are going on in New Mexico, and some very, you know, lack of oversight with existing operators that are already misusing and abusing water. And so this, what started off as, you know, hey, we need to put some equity in this bill, and we need to, you know, make sure that small farmers can actually benefit, has kind of turned into this. This might be a little bit more dangerous for New Mexico than I think we anticipated. And that was, we got involved as a small coalition. We got some rural water experts and some folks that are from rural communities that will be the most affected by this legalization, to say, hey, you forgot to mention the most impacted communities, which in New Mexico's case needs to be these rural communities. And there's some lack of water oversight, and there's quite a few other things that just were omitted, quite frankly. And so we've gotten into this big conversation now to say, you know, what existing groups are not being contacted when there are these legalization bills being placed? Are there environmental justice groups that are being consulted? Are they contributing to the drafting of this legislation? So just to kind of go back, I'm sorry to divert a little bit, but you know, equity in New Mexico looks a little bit different. There are very traditional land-based and water-based communities that operate off of acequias and that are kind of granted land from past land grants. And these communities were not consulted. And so right now we're in a really interesting spot where we're going to have to prepare and educate these communities for the kind of massive land and water grab that's going down in New Mexico right now. And I'd like to let it be known that farmers were asked in New Mexico to not grow food or to not farm at all costs this year because it's an extreme drought condition. Yet we legalized cannabis with unlimited license cap and at the moment kind of an unlimited plant count. So there was some wonderful expungement provisions that were put in there, some automatic expungement, some resentencing, 2 ounces or less of possession, homegrown cultivation. There's some good things in there, but I really wish that there would have been a little bit more of some impact reports, environmental, cultural, and even economic impact reports that were attached to this bill, because as it stands right now, it's putting some of these communities that are the most, that have the most to lose, which is traditional and family land and water at risk. So that's where we're at. I'll stop right there.
Oh, wow. Well, that's definitely really insightful. And I think we as an organization, I'm sure other folks want to help raise awareness around what's going on and in terms of the environmental impacts of the cannabis industry in New Mexico and equity. And I think, you know, you brought up some really important points that I think are issues that other states need to begin to tackle is, you know, just the water demand of cannabis production and those environmental impacts are enormous and they haven't really been addressed because it's such a, you know, new industry. Everybody's just, it's like the gold rush or something, but they're not thinking about those impacts as well. So I'm glad that you know, that there's some focus on that, although it seems like a lot of work to do in Mexico. And then next we'll talk about New York. Well, can you tell us what does legalization look like in New York?
Yes. Before I go there, I just want to say thank you for sharing that, Rosalie. I'm an urban planner by by degree. So I have my degree in sustainability, and that I learned something today. So this session isn't just for people that are joining us. I'm getting educated as well. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to personally do some more research into what's happening in New Mexico, and are they thinking about their water table and their floodplains and things like that. So thank you. So New York, I would say that New York is like a happy middle, I would say, between what's happening in New Jersey and what's happening in Virginia, right? There's some really, really good things in the law, right? So we know automatic expungements, right? So I think for any convictions when you were selling, anything less than 25 grams is automatically expunged, which is really great. Same thing with any convictions, I think it's 6 ounces as well, automatically expunged. So you don't need to contact a lawyer. You don't have to, you know, access your criminal record and file any kind of paperwork. So those are principles that, like, we're really excited about, the automatic expungements. We know that this is an equitable bill because it's built into the MRTA, right? So we know that there's going to be special licensings for, you know, social equity applicants. So that's a really good thing. But similar to in Virginia, we kind of have to figure out, what does that look like? So it's included in the bill. One thing that I'm really happy about is that they can have a sliding scale application license fee or no fee at all. So they're really giving that, or providing the fluidity for social equity applicants to not have to pay a licensing fee if it's going to be an exorbitant fee, right? So that's really good. Or even having a sliding scale, because there might be some minority owned companies that do have a little bit more access to capital and can afford a fee, right? So having that sliding ability is something that's like really awesome to have in the bill, right? We know that they're gonna allow home grow, and specifically something that I saw in the bill, which is amazing, is if you're an elderly person or someone who is homebound, you can actually fill out this form that they're going to create that lets someone speak on your behalf and pick up your medication for you, which I think is an awesome barrier to overcome, because a lot of people in New York, a lot of elderly aren't very mobile. You know, it's a very high intensity environment in New York City. So providing them that alternative to have a there's also a specific license for a caretaker. It's not a license, I'm sorry, it's a certification. So you can say that you are a patient or care provider for a cannabis patient, and you're able to pick up their medication for them. So I thought that was also something that's really great to be included into the bill. But there's also good things happening immediately. So when we say immediately, I think it was March 31st. I know it was towards the end of March. We have legalization, right? So immediately you can have up to 3 ounces on your person, which is great. Because like, Chelsea said, 1 ounce is not enough sometimes, right? You can consume in any public spaces where you can consume or where you can smoke cigarettes as well. So that's also a great way to kind of demystify and stigmatize consumption, because now we can actually see it happening in the public atmosphere, right? So that's also something that we're really happy about. But there's some things that we're not so happy about, right? So once again, who will be sitting on this commission and this advisory board? Because in our bill, they're going to be 2 different things, right? I think it's a bit problematic to have the governor be able to appoint 3 out of 5 of our advisory members. To me, that's a conflict of interest, right? 1 appointment, maybe not, 2, maybe not, but 3, you're looking at the majority of a 5-person board. However, they do also create the commission, right? So I believe how the bill breaks it down is the commission and the advisory board. No one who holds public office or currently holds public office is allowed to be on the commission, as well as the advisory board, as well as anyone who has any stake. So you can't own any cannabis stocks. You can't be on any licensing applications. You can't have any invested financial stake in the cannabis market, which is good, but you can have some political stake. And that's what I think we need to be aware of when they're starting to do appointments. We need to kind of keep our ears to the streets and say, who's being appointed? What is their current stance, not only on cannabis, but community reinvestment, right? We do know in the bill that they're doing 40% community reinvestment, which once again, pretty awesome, but the nitty gritty. There's a lot of things that they're putting under that community reinvestment umbrella. Things like re-education for the community, which is nice. Re-education for the police force, not nice, right? We know they want to do things like mental health and veterans affairs. That's all great, but 40% across a lot of these things in New York, which is a pretty big state, where we hope that the intention of the bill is what we see in the application of the bill, right? We know that they're putting 40% into education, 20% into mental health. So there is a breakdown of where the funds are going. But until we know who sits on the Cannabis Commission, who's going to sit on the advisory board, which is supposed to be made up of community members. So whether you're in a organization group, whether you are part of maybe your local district community board, that's the opportunity for you to really make your voice be heard. And much like Chelsea said, they're going to have the power. So the advisory board makes the suggestions to the commission, but they are the ones who have more of the power to say, this is how we're going to do licenses, these are how many licenses we're doing. So it's like, here in New York, there's so many organizations, and we're seeing a lot of for-profit cannabis institutions create a social arm and trying to use that as a way to circumvent into either the Cannabis Commission and Advisory Board. And we obviously know that we don't want that to happen as well. So much like Chelsea and Jessica, who alluded to the fact that the fight isn't done, it's the same thing in New York. We need to continue to put pressure to make sure that the people who will be sitting on these, commissions and advisory boards are people who care about social equity. We want to make sure that that 40% is distributed to the communities most impacted. And we're going to make sure things like delivery and home grow and even social consumption, because we are going to have special consumption lounges licensing. And something interesting about that, if there's anyone in New York City or New York State who's interested, you cannot apply or hold a license for anything else if you want a consumption lounge. So you can't decide to get a consumption lounge license and then want to do retail or cultivation. That's not allowed. So you really have to know upfront how it is you want to participate in this legal cannabis industry and really stick to that. So like all the ladies said, there's some good things happening, but there are also some points for concern, and it's really up to us as the people to really make sure that we're staying up to date on current events and that we're tapping in with the organizations that are not only knowledgeable, but actually doing the work in the industry.
It's great to hear. Definitely glad to have you in New York doing this work and, you know, making sure that these commissions and boards and everything, you know, come out with the right folks on them and they're held accountable. Also, you know, excited to hear that there's going to be a restriction on vertical integration. I think that's always good. The more, you know, people that you can have in different parts of the supply chain, the better, as well as hearing about it in Virginia. And so we talked about some of the things, you all mentioned some of the things that you maybe didn't like or didn't get in the bill. In New Jersey, I think you didn't get home grow. You know, of course, in Virginia, you can only have 1 ounce. So I assume, like, you know, any legalization bill is a result of some compromise, and there's different stakeholders and you have different interests. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, essentially, like, who's the opposition? Who are the ops in your state? Like, you know, creating it. You don't necessarily have to say who they were, but like, what sort of groups were there that were creating barriers to equity?
I would say the governor, and I don't care if that's shady. You know, I think it was definitely very timely that we passed in the midst of what was going on with his personal / professional life and all the accusations that were going on against him. But I know, for example, if you took a look at the CRTA and the MRTA, so the CRTA was the governor's bill, it was a joke. It was very laughable. However, a lot of concessions were made on both ends to move this MRTA. So the MRTA that was passed was not its original formation. You know, there were some things that the governor asked to be placed in there in order to move that along. And obviously, you know, we're fortunate, the greater good, we got the bill passed, right? But once again, having the governor being able to sorry, I'm blanking on the word and I literally just said it, to appoint 3 out of 5 people. That was something that he wanted in there. Allotting some of the funds to create technology that can do or mimic a breathalyzer for cannabis was something that he pushed for as well. And that was a big point of contestation when passing the bill, because that was a reason for a lot of senators to vote no, because they were like, this thing doesn't exist and we're not sure. But it's like when you think about alcohol and the prohibition, we legalized alcohol way before the breathalyzer was ever invented. So is that really a grounds for an argument? Not so much. So there were a lot of concessions and a lot of, you know, things that the governor wanted to happen that he didn't get everything, but he got some of the things he were looking for. But also, and, you know, I believe, well, I don't wholly believe in name and shame, but when we're thinking about laws, I think a lot of times if we're not putting that pressure on our politicians and then they get to make decisions and purport it as being their constituents, and it's not. So we knew that Long Island, Staten Island were major anti, you know, cannabis legalization, not to say all of their senators, but when you looked at all the 5 boroughs, it was 5 Long Island senators as opposed to 1 Brooklyn senator, right? So if you're looking at the boroughs, you're thinking, yeah, Brooklyn's pretty progressive, Long Island, not so much. Same thing with Staten Island. So really being aware that we're talking about New York State as a whole. And I, as a Brooklynite, cannot forget my brothers and sisters in Long Island, you know, or that are in Staten Island. So knowing that these are locations that are going to need additional support and are going to need to kind of continue to put that pressure on their senators and local city councilmen and women, because localities can opt out, right? So if we know that localities can opt out of having dispensaries or consumption lounges, but you may have a very high minority population, you want to make sure they don't get left behind in the dust. We also don't want to see a great migration. We don't want to see an influx of minorities feeling like they can't participate in their borough, so they're moving to Brooklyn or they're moving to Manhattan. We want them to be able to prosper in their localities. So I would say the big opposition was definitely Long Island, definitely Staten Island, and I would say our governor as well. But luckily, we were able to overcome those obstacles and get a very moderate, you know, and bipartisan MRTA passed.
Right. Yeah, I think, you know, I followed a little bit because of some of the accusations that the governor was facing too. So I think a lot of folks felt that that put some additional pressure on him to sort of compromise on some things. So glad to hear that there's some progress was made. Anybody else want to share their perspective on some of those issues in their state, that fight?
Sure, I'll go. So right across the river. So some of the obstacles that we face. So one, we have a cap on cultivation for the first 2 years, which means it's at 37 cultivators. And that encompasses our current operators, which we have 12. And then it also encompasses other licenses that are currently held up from a 2019 request for application. So there's only 13 standalone cultivation licenses up for grabs, and it is absolutely no secret that the folks who are really pushing for that cap were our current operators, who have failed to meet patient demand for the year since they've been, who have really just like failed our patient community in various ways. And so they also are going to get first bite at the apple. The moment that they can certify that they can meet patient demand, they will be able to begin dispensing adult use cannabis. The problem is they've never been able to meet patient demand, right? And here in New Jersey, where we're really at the epicenter with New York, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania, and the fact that Connecticut and Pennsylvania have still not legalized yet, we get over 100 million visitors a year in New Jersey. Our demand is going to be absolutely enormous, that to cap the cultivation, literally the source of product, is just going to limit our industry, and it's just going to continue to allow these few operators to continue their monopoly, because what's going on is they have no motivation to diversify their product. They have no motivation to lower their prices. They have no motivation to make it more accessible to patients, because of the simple fact that they don't have to. They're the only options that patients have. So definitely our current operators who did absolutely nothing for legalization, did absolutely nothing for social equity, never entered the conversation once, are going to be the ones to benefit from this cap on cultivation, as well as the fact that they're going to get first bite at the apple. The other part of the opposition that we had were employment groups. Employment groups pushed super hard because of this absolutely insane idea that the moment legalization happens, all of their workers are going to come to work intoxicated and unable to do their jobs, right? Which we obviously know it's not the case. And if we're adults and we empower and entrust our adults to make good decisions when it comes to prescription pills, when it comes to tobacco, when it comes to alcohol, why is it that we don't have the same faith in adults when it comes to cannabis? And so what they actually pushed for, and it is absolutely, and I have to say this because I really hope I don't see this in other states, is they have now what they call drug recognition experts at the workplace, which means that now like private employers can say, hey, employee, go to the police. They will train you to become a drug recognition expert, because obviously they are experts. And now you're going to get the certificate. You're now empowering civilians to be able to be at work and police individuals. All this sounds like to me is a breeding ground for discrimination. And the fact is, here in New Jersey, you can't smoke on the streets in the way that you can in New York, so kudos to New York. You can't smoke if your landlord tells you that you can't smoke in your house, right? If you're renting, you can't actually consume, right? If you're in Section 8 housing. So people are wondering, where can I consume? So if you're being policed still on the street, you're potentially being policed at home, you're now being policed at work if this happens. So that was something that I honestly, when I read it in the bill, I almost like fell over. I could not believe that that was something that passed, because it's so dangerous. And obviously we've seen in courts all around the country, judges are throwing out these drug recognition expert testimonies left and right, because nothing can really at this moment scientifically can prove whether or not I've consumed today or whether or not I've consumed 30 days ago. So that is a huge issue. And the other opposition also were municipalities. Municipalities really wanted an enormous control over who enters within their city borders, but they also wanted control of their endorsement requirements. So something popped up into the bill that stated that municipalities can enact their own endorsement requirements with no limitations whatsoever. I testified on this, I wrote public testimony, I talked to the press about this. What this is going to happen is, once again, this is going to create a breeding ground for play-to-play, which we've seen happen in other states. And so without any sort of restrictions on this, they can literally add more fees. The reason I know this is not a hypothetical is one municipality, Bayonne in New Jersey, they're saying that in order for you to apply, you have to pay anywhere between 5 to 10 grand for a license just to apply. And that's just on top of the state fees. And then if you get a license, you need to pay anywhere between $20,000 to $40,000 annual fee to be able to operate within that municipality. Municipalities already have a 2% tax that they can enact that they'll get revenue from, and now they're enacting these fees. But without a prohibition also to basically say, like, you know, if they're going to say, hey, actually now you need a letter from the mayor, you need a letter from every single council person in order to be here, all that's going to become is, well, when did you donate to my campaign, right? So I think in terms of our opposition, the things that we're facing, the things that are just creating higher barriers to entry when we should be lowering them, is we're looking at the current MSOs, we're looking at employer groups, and we are looking at municipalities. So I raise these issues because it's something that is very alarming that our government did not take into consideration, because they were just like, they didn't listen when we said this is happening in other states, right? They say, well, this is New Jersey and we're going to do it our way, but not putting forth any restrictions on any of these sorts of groups is just heightening the barriers to entry. And so it's definitely something that I will definitely also be working on.
Wow, there's a lot there to process and unpack, and it's really hard to believe. I mean, it's almost, I couldn't believe what I was hearing when you're saying there's like a workplace snitch certificate that you can get from the state, and you can go tell on your coworkers. That's insane. And yeah, it's like, you know, the more things change, the more things stay the same sometimes. Again, with the municipal shakedown and the head start that the cultivators and MSO gang get, which we want to hit on. I want to get you all's thoughts on MSO gang, but anybody else want to share their perspective on some of the obstacles and folks that put up barriers in their state?
I don't want to talk too long, because I just want to echo that many of the same barriers are showing up everywhere. I do want to just say us too with the DREs, but they're not in the workplace. But we also just outlawed the ability to search and seize your car because of the odor of marijuana. So another piece that I also wanted to say why the DREs have come in from Virginia is to recognize marijuana on the roadside. And so continuing to make driving while Black illegal, and understanding that our highest interaction with cops are actually in traffic stops. So when you ask me who is the opposition here in the Commonwealth, I'm going to tell you cops and corporations. Cops wanted to make sure there was still a way to police people in cars. They were demoralized by this bill, as well as policing our kids. One thing that we did really like in New Jersey is the way that the youth pieces came out. Here in Virginia, we're still making them delinquents, sending them to jail, expelling kids. So it's just not a thing. But I do want to just continue to say, and then the corporations too, just, and that looks like in cannabis, it may look like medical corporations. And that's why I'm really, really thankful here in Virginia for Minorities for Medical Marijuana that have been able to come in and advocate with us to look at this holistically. But yeah, cops and corporations.
At it again. There we go. Rosalie?
Yeah, law enforcement was very resistant to the bill. There is a large driving while under the influence problem in New Mexico, and so that's something that law enforcement was very concerned about. And I am now as well, because although people may not get arrested for possession of low-level amounts, they will likely get arrested for driving under the influence. And so that's going to be a really interesting measure to track. Legalization in New Mexico had a great support this year. It was pushed by the governor very heavily. It did not pass in the regular session, so she called for a special session a week and a half right after the regular session to push exclusively for cannabis legalization. There was quite a few Republicans that were opposed to it, but overall it had a lot of support, including the support of New Mexican residents. Apparently 74% of New Mexicans really wanted legalization. My concern with that is that when a bill is sold to say, hey, don't you think people shouldn't go to jail anymore for weed? Don't you think we should legalize weed? And it's presented in such a fashion that you're kind of not giving people the full picture to actually make the educated decision, you know? And so I do wish that when New Mexicans were asked, you know, do you want legal weed? It could come at the cost of water. It could come at the cost of your culture and land ownership. Is it still something that you want to do? And I think that people aren't given that, that kind of educated information. This is the cost to enter the industry. Instead of saying, hey, you can enter this industry and there's going to be an opportunity for you to benefit. That's the way it was sold. And so the greatest opposition came from our coalition at the very end. We went frantic and sent out a number of emails to every single person we possibly could to say, yes, this has been discussed for a long time. Yes, we should have gotten involved sooner, but these organizations actually should have been reached out to first, instead of saying, hey, we want to be involved in this conversation. You have to contact the communities that are most directly affected to talk about what was going on. And so we tried to stop the special session to say we need more time. There needs to be more people involved. And when that didn't happen, we tried to get amendments. But now there actually is quite a bit of awareness around the actual issues to say, oh, corporate cannabis is coming. They're going to give us a lot of money for our little bit of land that we've had forever and ever that we can't utilize, and we've been told not to farm right now anyway. So I really, really hope that future states, as they go forward, aren't just the folks that are drafting the bill aren't just normal and safe access and just these cannabis focused groups. I think that when we're looking at legalization simply from a drug policy perspective, you're excluding a whole bunch of other issues and a whole bunch of other communities that actually have the most to lose. And so I'm gonna ask on some of these national organizations at this point now, not to just look at it from a drug policy reform perspective. There's so much else at stake here. And so we have so much work to do, and including having to defend some of these local communities from medical cannabis operators that are currently stealing or misusing water. And these operators just became more powerful with the legalization bill. And so now these communities are having to change bylaws and protect themselves in a way that they never expected they had to when these original laws were written. And that's what was so concerning to me when they were like, New Mexicans are ready for this. And the truth of the fact is they're not. We have to mobilize on a very grassroots level to educate all of these communities on what's really going to happen. And I just think there was a bunch of misinformation.
That happens in a lot of states. And, you know, I think everyone here just talked about the influence and the power that corporate cannabis and MSOs have. And wanted to get you all's thoughts, or if you heard about the whole hashtag MSO gang. And you know, I think there wasn't enough pressure put on them, or you know, that issue wasn't highlighted enough, just the sort of tone deafness around that stuff. But just wanted a quick question if anybody had any thoughts or reactions to that whole MSO gang trend that was happening on Twitter and other spaces.
Because I know the algorithm's just a little bit, I tried not to engage. I said, let's not bring that here. But yeah, I saw it. And I think that because Virginia in 2020, Marijuana Justice worked really hard with the legislator to bring a comprehensive study to Virginia that focused on an equitable model and that spelled out very specifically about MSOs. And that was something that we worked with them, and it was an independent body. So if you are looking to legalize, look at having a study that will be able to have something while they're legalizing that you can say, look at your own data. So that's what we were able to do, and why many of our legislators were already kind of armed with that MSO piece, but I try to just stay out of it.
Yeah, I hear that. It was crazy. And so, you know, 4 new states just legalized cannabis. We see the dominoes are toppling across the US. At this point, 43% of Americans live in a rec state, which is crazy. I mean, just 10 years ago, they were like none. And now almost half the country lives in a recreational cannabis state. And so now we're looking at the Biden administration like, oh, like what's going on? What's up? Like, get it together. Like, you know, the Senate is ready to go. Chuck Schumer, Cory Booker. And so it's only a matter of time, it seems, before we see federal legalization. What would you like to see in federal legalization? Like, what lessons have you learned from your fight in your state that federal stakeholders and lawmakers should take?
So I'll start it off. So for me, just one thing, right, is I know like when the MORE Act, what was happening, I think like a month and a half ago, and it was moving forward at the 11th hour, they added the caveat that if you had any sort of cannabis conviction or cannabis felony, that you would be excluded from the industry. I thought that was just absolutely abysmal. It just completely undermines and underscores the entire purpose of that bill. That one line or two just eviscerated that whole bill as a whole. And so I am hoping that when the federal government does decide to legalize, which truth be told, I'm pretty patient with it, just because the states have not yet gotten it right, that I fear what the federal government will do and how they're actually going to execute this. But I would just hope that they keep in mind, they're cognizant of the fact that when you add language excluding the group of people that shoulder the burden of the criminalization of cannabis, almost all equity efforts just really go out the window. They have to be taken into consideration. They have to be given a pathway into it, but they also have to provide meaningful opportunities, because I think a lot of times when people hear social equity, they hear, let's just give some folks some licenses, right? Let's just give some Black, Latino, Indigenous folks licenses, and that'll be it. But having licenses doesn't guarantee success, as we've seen multiple, even huge conglomerates shut down. And as long as we have the IRS tax code 280E in place, a lot of these cannabis companies are not going to be able to be financially profitable if they don't have the resources available. And so I am hoping that they take that into consideration, as well, because we do need to see meaningful opportunities. We need to see financial resources. We need to see mentorships. We need to see incubator programs. We need to see an enormous amount of education, because social equity doesn't just stop at who gets a license or not. That's part of it, right? But we have a whole web to untangle. We have years of discrimination and years of fallacies to really extinguish that. It's important that people also understand that this is not going to happen overnight, right? This is going to take steps on steps. But I think it's also important that we educate, our representatives that, just giving somebody a license is not enough by any means.
I think any kind of investment into police departments is a no-go. We've been hearing a lot of things about re-education. We have to re-educate officers on how to deal with and how to interpret cannabis laws. And it's like, we could defund the police, and we've been saying that, and we mean that, right? So how can we say defund the police, but on the same end say, let's divert some cannabis, some cannabis tax revenue to re-educating them? That it doesn't work, and I don't see how logically it would make sense. Look at the training they have received, the racial sensitivity training, the stop and frisk. What did that do? Nothing. They were still stopping Black and brown folks on the street. They were still using odor as a means to pull people over when they're driving. So to say anything or to reinvest anything into police education, I think would be a huge detriment to righting the wrongs, which is what I think people want to do by federally legalizing cannabis, right? So we can't say that we're trying to undo the harms done to these communities by funding the very people that are doing the harm to the communities, or even things like repurposing. I want to say shout outs to Chelsea. Girl, I be all up in your stories, and I completely agree. We need to repurpose a lot of these cop cars. Like, there's a lot of money that we're putting into not only training and education, but in actual, collateral. Why are they getting updated cars? Why are they getting updated tasers and things like that? It doesn't make sense. Why are they getting outdated war equipment to police communities? It doesn't make sense. So to say that any kind of tax revenue from cannabis needs to go into educating and arming police officers into how to deal with these laws is nonsense. And it's not something that needs to make it to the final bill. At the end of the day, we need money for community reinvestment, for education of our people, for programs that's going to create generational wealth and raise the actual, circulation of the dollar in these communities. And I don't see that happening by putting even a penny into, police reinvestment and re-education. So I would say that's the one thing that I do not want to make into any kind of final federal legalization.
And I want to agree with all of these points. I would really love for the legalization bills to actually address the drug war. And as you said, Lo, I think that this is what. And I want to agree with all of these points. I would really love for the legalization bills to actually address the drug war. And as you said, Lo, I think that this is what they want to do, is right the wrongs. Well, I want to see that in the language. to be really honest, and is how we were holding Virginia legislators accountable by them saying our priority is racial equity. Well, proposing it to do it legal in 3 years is not a priority, right? So I want to see that marijuana is part of the failed war on drugs. It is included on that, and this is something that we're really looking to redo and redress. That's a big hope, but that would be part of it. And the other part I'd really like to see is repealing the criminalization of cannabis within the other institutions that disenfranchise us and oppress us, right? The medical institution, child welfare around cannabis, the social services institution. I'm a clinical social worker and had been for a really long time. I understand what it's like when a family admits that they have cannabis use. The housing industry, education industry. I mean, there are institutions all over that have criminalized us in proximity to this plant. So I'd like to also see how we are truly repealing and allowing folks to feel the benefit so that they can safely talk to their providers, school systems, and just people around within their communities without feeling like this taboo is still there. So just continuing to do the repeal, and as everyone has just mentioned, in all of the institutions that have truly criminalized cannabis.
So there's a couple things I would like to see in a federal bill, although that does, federal legalization does make me a tiny bit nervous because every state is different. And I think that when we're legalizing in individual states, you have to take the demographics, the economic conditions, the environmental conditions into consideration. And a federal legalization bill may not be able to address those as well. But one of the things that I really hope happens as legalization goes forward is the inclusion of the most impacted communities. And and I looked at the Arizona bill, and I'm just starting to probe in other states to see, but there was no mention of tribal communities in the Arizona recreational bill. There was no mention of water in the Arizona recreational bill. And these are states with water issues. And so there's not a one size fits all for legalization. And so when we got involved in the New Mexico conversation, we started contacting, racial justice organizations, environmental justice organizations. And we're like, have you been contacted? Did you look at this? Does this affect your community? And so I would love to see, as states legalize, for them to open the door and say, we need to talk to tribal communities. We need to talk to existing agricultural communities. How will this affect your industry? The chili farmers in New Mexico weren't consulted, and that is, our largest crop in New Mexico. They hadn't really thought about the impacts on their industry with this. Until they started receiving calls from out-of-state operators. So I really would like racial justice groups, environmental justice groups, and so many other groups, organizations to be involved in the drafting of this bill, not just cannabis legalization type of advocates. Something else I'd love to see is lowered regulations and restrictions. I think that that's the biggest barrier, and we're talking about legalizing the plant, but you still have to have 6-foot walls and double locked doors and passes and keys and securities and cameras and all of this stuff. But and that's the biggest barrier to entry at the moment, is because there's so many requirements to keep it safe and locked and hidden from public view. And so I'd love to see lowered restrictions. Let's actually legalize the plant. Let's make it more accessible. Let's stop putting this huge capital on all of these requirements that the industry is making and saying that are needed. And of course, banking access and funding and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a lot of nuggets of wisdom there for the Biden administration. I hope they're taking notes. So today's 420. I'm going to, switch to something a little bit lighter. How are folks in your city celebrating 420? Like, your organizations, like what's available for people to do? I know it's COVID, and so, things are a little different, but, a lot of folks are coming out of the pandemic. Like, what's going on in your city?
It is still illegal in Virginia. I just want to let everyone know. Happy 420. And here in the Commonwealth, don't get caught up by the cops. So we are really enjoying with a lot of our partners, and there are some pop-up shops that you can find around BCU campus, and to buy some gear and to support some artists out here in particular. That's what we're trying to do right now. And just catch a lot of our programs online that will be available later, just to hear more about what's going on in Virginia. But today, 420 is stay indoors, protect yourself, enjoy yourself, and we'll definitely see you July 1.
Yeah, so I think here in New Jersey, I know that there are a couple of smokeouts that will be, occurring. And of course, with my legal hat on, I inform people that you are still not allowed to consume on the street. So you're basically, doing that at your own risk. But I know there's a lot of programs. I know Minorities for Medical Marijuana is having it. I know Hope Wiseman with her 420 experience is having. So I'll be speaking on there as well. But at least, here in New Jersey, I just want to, advise folks that you still can definitely, while you're not going to get arrested or anything like that, but they can actually confiscate your product just because legal sales have not begun. So if you're not a medical patient, you don't have it in a medical container, they can still confiscate it and you can still get a citation. So definitely consume at your own risk outside. But if you own a home, then go crazy. But keep it under 6 ounces.
New York is, we're the wild, wild west right now. So you are allowed to consume, once again, in any place that you can consume cigarettes. However, I do want to put on your radar, all New Yorkers, that certain parks that are maintained by 501c3s or the parks departments, they're actually putting up signage that's saying that you cannot consume. So if you do have plans on attending a park, make sure you understand and know where that park lies as far as consumption on their grounds. Because, for example, Prospect Park, which is in Brooklyn, even before it was legal, people were smoking, but they currently don't have any signage. But when you start moving closer into the city, so like Bryant Park, for example, they do have signage up that went up in this week that says that you cannot consume. So just being aware of, yes, there are public spaces and now we can, and even if they do allow cigarettes, they may not allow cannabis, and because it's up to their discretion, right? So you just want to make sure that you're being thoughtful, looking for any signage. But yeah, go crazy. It's also Taco Tuesday, so I know that there's a few taco events that are happening throughout the city. Like Chelsea and Jessica mentioned, just tune into our channels. We are posting events that are happening nationwide. So if you have no idea what to do today, I know, for example, like Jessica said, there are tons of virtual events, but in New York, there are some actual picnics. They're having some taco parties. There's some, bar kind of lounge event things happening as well. So just follow us on WOCC, that's _WOCC. Keep an eye out because we'll be consistently posting things that you guys can attend today. So.
Is anything going on in New Mexico? Or can people even really celebrate?
No, not yet, not until late June. And here in Colorado also, they canceled the big event that they usually have due to COVID. So I'm not sure what's going on, but I will definitely be dancing and celebrating later today.
Great. That's great to hear. So yeah, before we finish up, can you tell folks how they can support your work and your organizations? Whether it's donate, site to donate to, or Instagram, Twitter, social media, whatever.
Sure. Go ahead, Rosalie.
We just started New Mexico Cannabis Justice Project Instagram. Like I said, we're very new. I am looking very forward to connecting with you ladies offline to learn more about ways that more things I can do in New Mexico. But for right now, we just have this very, very basic Instagram, and we're going to form. And we're just, if you would just follow and support so we can educate on the issues. I think that being the most impoverished state in the country, being one of the few minority majority states in the country, I think we have a unique perspective and something interesting to offer when we're talking about legalization. It is crucial that we change our drug policy reform and all of that stuff. But we definitely don't want legalization to come at the cost of other very crucial, important elements, like they may in New Mexico. I very much hope that it doesn't turn out the way that it could, but I definitely would appreciate you all following New Mexico Cannabis Justice Project. And at some point, we'll have some more stuff going forward. We're scrambling at the moment right now, though.
Great, will do.
Yeah, and then so here in New Jersey, I post on my own personal Instagram, so Cannabogada, CANNABOGADA, not Cannabodega. as people think it is. It means cannabis lawyer in Spanish. I also urge folks to definitely check out M4MM as well, the 420 experience, and help to support that. And I also want to also give a big shout out to the ACLU of New Jersey as well, who has actually been tremendous partners in our fight for social equity. So definitely check them out and support them as well.
And I can go next. Make sure everyone is following THC Justice Now on all social media accounts. You can find our webpage at marijuanajustice.org. We will definitely take your money. We are a Black-led, Black-run organization. And I'll be very honest that we've been doing this for 2 years, but we did not get our very first grant until last September after the 2020 uprising. So the support for Black-led in the South right now is just kind of being there. Would love to hear more of that. And I'm going to just go ahead and also, because I actually had it on my notes here when I talked about youth, and give a shout out to New Jersey ACLU too. Amy up there, she has been great at educating me, particularly as we were fighting this. And so as folks are listening, just realize that we have to work together across this country to educate and inform one another. So please follow us. We'll follow back and connect and see how we can continue this fight.
And once again, if you're interested and want to keep up to date with what's happening in New York, you can follow us on Instagram at _WOCC. You can also log on to our website where we have lots of free resources. We have, career prep kind of things up there. We have just regular information. We have, contacts for people if you're interested and want to kind of pick brains and really find your space. We have all of that on our website for free. So that's WOCC.world, WORLD, because, welcome to woke world. And yeah, we often, post and like Chelsea said, we can't do it alone. So definitely shout outs to Smart New York, definitely shout out to Drug Policy Alliance and smaller organizations as well. Like Chelsea just said, well, we've been doing the work for 3 years now, and we haven't received a grant. This is all just out of our blood, sweat, and tears. We're self-financing everything. We're doing a lot of trades and barters, so really getting creative because we don't believe that, finance should be a barrier to providing people to education and increasing their skill set. So we're willing to pay the cost to really be able to provide things at no cost to our community members because we want to service underprivileged communities and minority communities as well. So if you're interested in donating, we are a 501c3, which means it's a tax write-off for you. So we can provide you with that information where you can write this off. We are accepting donations, and that's, like I said, it's literally what keeps the light on, as opposed to, or in addition to, I should say, my partners and I really self-funding from our 9 to 5. So any little bit helps. We also raise money for our monthly events, and we have no minimum and no maximum. You can donate a penny, you can donate, 25 cents, you can donate $1,000, whatever feels comfortable. But we appreciate it because it is selfless work, but we want to keep doing the work because we think it's so important and so necessary. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're super informal. We answer texts, DMs, and emails. So we're looking forward to connecting with you, Rosalie, and also Chelsea. Akele, pleasure to see you again, and same thing for you, Jessica.
I really appreciate that. And y'all really should support these organizations. Like Lo said, I mean, these really are like self-funded organizations. Like they are, spending their, blood, sweat, and tears to build these organizations to do this important work. And so it's really important that you support them. Huge thanks to you all for joining us today and sharing your wisdom and insights that you've gained from this fight for equity in your states. Really appreciate that. And we look forward to continuing to work with you to raise awareness around this nationally and locally. And everyone enjoys the rest of their 420.
Hey, before we leave, can I show my shirt?
Yeah, show your shirt. Show the shirts. Also, yes, we got to do that.
This is a marijuana justice shirt. So that's another way y'all can support, is just kind of wear our narratives, put it out there, find shirts that talk to liberation around this movement and put it out. All
right, I'm about to buy one. I'm going to put it out there. I said it live, so I got to do it. So.
Woke shirts available? No, I'm joking.
Get a woke shirt too. All right, everyone. Peace.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Enjoy the rest of your day, ladies. Happy 420, everyone.
Happy 420.